Hey everybody, this is AJ Ali. I'm back with episode number 2 of the Love is the Answer podcast. And today I am here with someone really, really special, De-Dee Loftin Davis. Hi, De-Dee.
Hi, AJ.
How's it
How
going?
are you? Good. COVIDing it.
Right. Yes. What a crazy time we're in, huh?
Yes, unbelievable, but reality, it's believable. It's happening.
Yeah. How's everybody doing in your family? Are you good? Your husband good?
By the grace of God, yes, we have not been affected by the disease. We've had family members who have been, and we checked on them, and they're okay, thankfully. They're, of course, in a different state, but they're okay, so we're grateful.
Awesome. Well, I will keep them and you and your husband in my prayers as we move forward through this thing. We're all, as they say, in this together. We got to watch out for each other and really put love into action, right?
Always.
Yeah. So you are one of the amazing contributors to the Love is the Answer book. This is the cover of the book here, and De-Dee is inside and has just a powerful story. The story that you wrote just blew me away.
Thank you. It's my experience. It's my life. What, I went through from the lens of a little girl to where I am now.
So before you're going to read a little bit from your chapters in the book.
I am. And, I'm in chapter 67. If you can see this, yay!
All right.
Chapter 67, page 331. For those in the back.
331. Okay. It's 482 pages of this mastermind relationship book, and De-Dee's got just some incredible things to say. So why don't you go ahead and read part of your chapter.
Sure. I'm going to share my mother and dad's love story. Where's my pretty little princess? Right here, Daddy. Let's go for a ride, princess. Okay, Daddy, I'm ready. My dad, a handsome 6'3", tall and dark, yes, dark chocolate, cowboy hat wearing man. An all-American hero who bravely fought for our country in Vietnam. Daddy always smelled so good, like fresh out the shower with a dash of Old Spice good. Daddy lit up every room he was in with his hilarious laughter and joy. My mom was a tiny 5'2", curvy and sexy mocha chocolate complected little darling, 6'2" and 5'2". I don't know how it happened, but it did. She's still beautiful. Just a tiny bit more fluffy. They met at the Fort Dix Army Base in New Jersey, Wrightstown, New Jersey, while my mom worked as a secretary and my dad as a serviceman. My mom, the young, beautiful, and ambitious working woman, did not have any time for men. Young herself, my mom had a baby to raise, her career to think of, and dreams to live. My mom was a realist who worked hard for every penny she earned, trying to better herself and her young, beautiful baby daughter, my older sister, Monique. My gregarious, tall, dark, and handsome father had lots of charm, a romantic, heroic soldier who thought my mom was one of the most beautiful women inside and out he had ever met. The two were complete opposites. My mom and dad never married, nor talked much about their relationship to me. The result, one part weakness on my mom's part, mixed with 3/4 of alcohol and on my dad's part. I always assumed I was their unplanned love child and left it at that.
Wow. So that sets the stage for an amazing life that you're living.
Yeah. I have the best of both worlds. I have that calm, strategic personality mixed with gregarious and laughter and joy. So it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And some fire, too. You got some fire in you.
I do. That's my dad. That is true.
Because you take on some tough subjects, and you don't pull any punches, but you also do it with love, right? You do it with a measure of love that kind of balances out something very serious. So tell everybody a little bit about the work that you do and how you're making an impact.
So love was really a theme in our household growing up. My mother, again, was a single parent. We grew up in the projects, very poor, but my mom was always ambitious, and she always felt that education and hard work would take us out of the projects, and thankfully it did. And we always had love. My father, when he would come down for visits, it was fun. It was just a joy, you know. So that's one thing that I believe I was rich in. And so because I was rich in it, I'm able to share it with that lens, the love I received from my mother and my father. Now, when it comes to racism, there's no love in racism at all. But to communicate the problems, the systemic, the institutionalized racism, there needs to be a vehicle. Now, some people, again, have a Dr. Martin Luther King approach, you know, that's more universal, widely accepted. While others have the Marcus Garvey approach. You know, let's all go back to Africa, screw America. Let's go back and let's live our life, our best life. And then some, of course, have the Malcolm X philosophy that, you know, no integration, just us. You know, so I wanted to just go in between, you know, leaders like that, because they're all great leaders in their own respect. But I wanted to find a bridge. And one thing all three had was, well, before Marcus Garvey passed away, Malcolm X and Dr. King had, was a respect for each other, at least for the movement and what they were trying to do. And they had, of course, an unapologetic love for the Black community.
Yeah, they certainly did, and you know, impacted millions, hundreds of millions, and you're talking about people around the world they impacted, not just here. So the difference that they made is now kind of passed on to us, right, to run with it. And I think you take a really good approach, and I try to lean towards the MLK approach, but also bring in some other elements. And I think you do a really great job of that as well, with how you mix the best concepts and notions of how do we get people to understand these serious problems, and not only understand them, but do something about it. You're very good at getting people to move into action.
Thank you. I mean, you look at our audience and my audience on LinkedIn and even on Facebook, I'm so grateful for that. I started really literally from nothing. I don't have any corporate backing or someone, a corporate sponsor sponsoring my LinkedIn page or anything like that. It's just me talking real talk to the audience that I have. I'm so blessed and grateful that, one, it's free, and that it's, of course, global. And so I approach it just basically from a human experience. You know, people who have never experienced racism but have seen that, and try to communicate it and find that bridge as to say, you know, even though you haven't experienced it, it's still, racism is a human experience. So just on that note alone, you know, that principle alone, even though you haven't experienced it, it's still human. And most people get that. You know, when you listen to someone, even though you haven't gone through their experience, whether it might be a divorce, a lost child, maybe getting laid off or fired, it's still something that you can listen to and you can connect on just based on that human experience if you want to. And of course, the Black and brown communities, you know, this is our lived experience. So just being able to share that with people through the vehicle of love and empathy, as well as that fire and passion, because you really can't speak happy talk when it comes to racism, because our lives are made demonstratively worse because of institutionalized and systemic racism. Over 400 years added on to Jim Crow and civil rights oppression and law enforcement. So there's no way to paint a rosy picture about that. And I always speak to that as well, because that's not our lived experience.
Absolutely. You know, the situation that we're in right now is kind of reflective of the damage that systemic racism can cause, right? So we're dealing with COVID-19. We're dealing with not only the illness itself, but also the ramifications that are coming through economic and other means. So COVID-19, I told someone the other day that, when white America gets a cold, black America gets the flu, right? We've all heard that saying. And I went on further to say that when white American companies go through a pandemic, they get millions of dollars thrown at them to sustain themselves.
We just saw that with different corporations getting that pandemic money, COVID, stimulus money. And
some of them being shamed really into giving it back, right? Or not taking it. And so black owned businesses generally don't have access to capital in the good times. And during this pandemic, I'm talking to person after person after person who's not getting a break. They're not getting the business. They're not getting the support from the government. They're not getting the stimulus money. So what's your take on how COVID-19 is impacting business, impacting Black life in America, and what do people in general need to do about it?
So as we know, it's a pandemic that's not just affecting, of course, Black and brown people. It started from, of course, research and from the news over, of course, in Asia, and then, of course, filtered out to different countries in Italy and Sweden. So COVID-19 does not discriminate. We do. Right. Humans do. So that's one thing we learned, that, it has no respect of persons. That said, because of the long history of systemic and institutionalized racism, and not just, of course, education and business and law enforcement and even religious institutions, we're now finding, of course, I shouldn't say we're now finding out, because we always knew that, the Black and brown community, that there was systemic racism in healthcare, and the disparities that exist in healthcare with not just community hospitals failing in our communities, or there's just not access, or the healthcare that we received, of course, is just basic, bare minimal because of the jobs that are basically afforded to us, even though we're educated. Black women, of course, by research, are the leading group when it comes to college-earned degrees. However, we know that through, of course, racial research, that our pay is not equitable to a white woman or a white man. So because our jobs do not cover all the time our health care, and I'm just speaking you have those disparities. So racism does what it does. People say, we all start out with the same, bag, and we do with what we have in our, mixed bag of tricks. Well, that's not true, because, of course, we know Black and brown community, we weren't given a bag. We weren't even given a potato sack. We weren't even given 40 acres and our mule. That being said, we had to make do what we had, and that was scraps. And from scraps, we got college degrees. From college degrees, we got opportunity into entrepreneurship. So my point is this: community is everything. One thing our ancestors taught us is community. When it came to slavery and the abolitionists, that started in a community conversation. It wasn't just, one person woke up and said, I want to be free, I'm going to start a movement. No, you had to have support. So one thing I believe the Black and brown community is really strong in is that word, community. And so that has helped us. So through COVID, getting back to, of course, COVID-19, it's been community. NAACP has been a strong voice in this pandemic, and having town hall meetings. I linked them up on my LinkedIn page and Facebook, and they share information that's not readily available maybe to some people who are not aware of what's going on from the government, and of course from research and racial data, which now, of course, thankfully in some states is mandatory. Of course, like Illinois and other states like New York are saying, okay, this is mandatory now. So that's progress right there. That's even good news in a pandemic, that now racial research is required in some states. As a racial equity consultant, that's the bane of my existence, not having the proper data or access to the proper data, because it's not required for most jobs or most career fields, whereas some other career fields, you can readily get it, or you have to pay for it, and it's expensive, going to a college, to their library and getting that, or looking online and having to pay for a company's medical research on race data. So now it's becoming more free, and becoming free, so more accessible, which is helping us and strengthening us to have a bigger voice and say, okay, now we know, what we have to focus on. So let's do this. and let's get it done.
Yeah.
We know that now, of course, that with COVID-19, it's affecting people, especially in the Black and brown communities, with obesity and hypertension. It's not just affecting, of course, those populations, but more vulnerable, at least with that, and high blood pressure. It's affecting kidneys, not just our lungs. It's affecting, of course, all organs in our body from head to toe. That came through race research and how fast we got it. How fast we got it. So I always say that if we can get it that fast, we can have anti-racism policies even faster because of this. If there's any good news that comes out of COVID-19, it's the racial research we're getting, the information we're getting, so that we can come up with better solutions. Because the last 400 years, while there have been solutions, there's been little to no progress in areas that are most important to us.
Yeah, that's right. Now's the time. I think now's the time. You know, you mentioned that COVID-19 is no respecter of a person, of status, of color. It doesn't care whether you're rich or poor, or black or white, right? So people are also understanding that if their neighbor is affected by it, it may affect them.
Exactly.
And that right there is opening up some possibilities for us to tap into some people's hearts and minds and get them to understand that if I'm not well, you are not well.
Exactly.
Because for so long people have thought, I don't really, that doesn't affect me, so they can deal with that problem. But with COVID-19, it's opening up the realization that we are truly dependent on each other. So we need to be there for each other, and some of us need to be there more than we have been.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the governors and the mayors that are really sounding the alarm and saying we're not there yet, and still lengthening the stay-at-home orders. You have the fringe element saying, we need our rights, and ironically, that's linked to a lot of people in the Trump movement, which I won't really go into because that, that's not where we're talking about right now. I do talk about that extensively on my social media, but that being said,
and I want to encourage people, definitely check out your social media, and we'll put links in the text portion of this, because you do share so many important topics that you have a big following, but hopefully it'll get bigger and bigger because people need to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. And I don't take that following for granted, because I always try to make sure when I give information out, it's well researched, it's well studied, and of course there is peer-reviewed articles that are attached to it, so I'm giving correct information. I feel there is a certain responsibility to that because of the platform that I have. And again, I only have 5,000 followers, which I'm grateful for, but my views sometimes go up to 250,000 views, which I'm grateful for, but I'm more so grateful for the engagement, because again, of the lived experience of Black and brown people, even white people now, of course, who have joined in on my engagement, on my post, add to the conversation as well, because racism, again, it's a human problem, so it's going to take humans from all walks of life. There are some people, who I love, dearly, who say, racism can only be solved by Black and brown people. Well, if that were the case, it would have happened during slavery. Right, so we need everybody in, even though there are people who benefit, especially, of course, through white solidarity, through white supremacy. But that's not all of the white race. Just like the Black community is not monolithic. We're not all the same. There are Democrats and there are Republicans and there are independents. One of my favorite quotes is by Henry Louis Gates, and he says that there are over 40 million Black people in North America, in the U.S. So there's 40 million ways to be Black. So, on my LinkedIn page, I just share my experience on my Black experience, and how, I believe, through the science, through the research, we can, become better anti-racists. There's no way racism is going to be solved tomorrow, but we can make more progress together than separate, because that's the very principle, definition of racism: division. And there are people, leaders in government, who capitalize on that division for over 400 years. And so for the anti-racism, to fight racism, you need to have unity. and cohesion and many, many bridges, and different voices, not just one voice. We learned that during civil rights movement. So it's going to take all of us. And love is that vehicle.
Absolutely. And that's why, I didn't just do the Love is the Answer book myself. That's why I invited incredible friends like yourself to pitch in and contribute. And 29 different people who have different backgrounds, different views, amazing people in their own right, but no two are the same. And so it makes for an incredible gumbo of views and information. So let's talk a little bit about those 4 love principles, right? So love is the answer. Love is an acronym, and the first letter is for learn. And so the question that I have for you is, what books or blogs, other than your blogging and the Love is the Answer book, should people be reading right now to deal with racism, to deal with life in general, and creating those allyships to bring people together?
So for those who really know me, they know I love to read. And I got that actually from my grandfather who helped raise me along with my grandmother. Back in the day, of course, many seniors stayed with the family, or we stayed with the seniors as our parents were off working because we couldn't afford daycare. So one of the things that my grandfather always emphasized was reading books because he had a 3rd grade education. He was born in 1901. In North Carolina, Kingston, North Carolina. Shout out Kingston, but the Jamaica part of North Carolina. And he basically, through, of course, Jim Crow and racism down south, he was not afforded an education, or he had to pass different territories of the KKK that had no problem killing children. And so he had 8 brothers and sisters. His father passed away when he was young, that he had to help raise with his mother. And so he went out and he picked, of course, cotton, and he picked blueberries and peaches in the field of North Carolina. Of course, he always learned for reading, and he would go to church every single Sunday. And the only book that he could learn to read was the Bible. And so he would read different chapters to me in the Bible that he could pronounce basically as much as he could, or he learned mimicking from the pastor. And so when I went to school and when I learned in kindergarten, I would rush home and I would read to my grandfather and help him learn how to read. So it was one of the biggest accomplishments in my young life, helping my grandfather learn how to read. So of course, fast forward to now, I have a voracious hunger for books and reading, because it not only helped me connect with my family, but my grandfather, and gave him, he always said, "You gave me my dignity back, De-Dee." And I'm like, "Really, Grandpa?" I'm like, "What does that mean?" And he would say, "Well, look it up." And then I would just cry, because as a grown man, being illiterate, that was hard for him. But he was a hard worker. He kept down 5 jobs, had 2 businesses, and was successful for a Black man in the early 1900s. But again, helping him to read just made him feel more complete. So that made me feel good. So getting back to what I love to read, I'll give you my 3 books that I love to read. And I read them over and over again because they're so good. The first book, of course, is my go-to, and that's by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, "Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria?" That book is everything. Before diversity and inclusion became diversity and inclusion, back in 1997, there weren't a lot of people talking about diversity and inclusion, except for Dr. Tatum. She was basically talking about the microaggressions, the explicit and implicit bias, and even racism and adverse racism. So she was giving names and terms, while she was going to Stanford and teaching at different universities that we didn't have. So she was adding to our vocabulary. So for me, I'm sure it's arguably other people, but for me, she's my go-to. She's my standard. Dr.
Awesome.
Beverly Daniel Tatum. She's my go-to. And the book, of course,
Okay.
is Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria. My second, of course, is Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson.
Yep.
And she talks about the Great Migration. And my grandfather coming from North Carolina up to Florence, New Jersey, he was part of that. And so, you know, I get to share his
Nice.
experience vicariously through the book. So I thank God for her book as well. And a book that I recently read, which I really, really appreciate because it resonates with me on race, on the racism and religion, is Color of Compromise by Dr. Jamar Tisby. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jamar Tisby, I believe. But The Color of Compromise. And he gives an historical, exhaustive information on just how religion has infiltrated, racism has infiltrated religion all the way back from the Roman Empire to Catholic empires to Protestant empires to Christian evangelical present day empires now, if you will. And it's amazing, and goes through that history on to present day, and how racism really has been the vehicle for many religions to hold back people of color and Black and brown people. Those are my three.
Wow,
my three pillars.
Those are three incredible picks. I'm gonna have to get those myself.
Please do. Yes, they're really amazing.
So the second letter in love is the O, and that stands for open your heart. So after you've learned with your mind, we ask people to let that knowledge sift down into their heart, open it up, and have some empathy. Why should people care about this, especially people who don't look like you and me? Why should they care? Why should they open their heart up to issues like systemic racism if it doesn't affect them every day?
Many people, at least who I conversate on LinkedIn and on whether just normally before the COVID-19 face-to-face interactions through presentations and facilitations that I did, would always say, well, I'm a good person. You know, and I want to be better. And I say, well, if you want to be better and be a good person, you need to back up with your actions. So just on that principle alone, if you believe you're a good person, then you will not stand for racism. If you don't believe you're a good person, then, you know, you see the alternative. So if you believe you're a good person, every good person, racism, of course, and I appreciate this just came out by the Council of Churches, has declared racism as a sin. I posted that on my LinkedIn page. So we know that 80% of the 80% of the world has a religion, has a faith-based religion. They believe either in one God or many gods, but there's a faith there. And so when you speak to religion, if 80% of the population believes in a God or gods, you know, that right there is a standard right there with racism. And every religion, I can't think of any religion that would not call racism a sin. Whether you're Christian, Buddhist, Methodist, or, you know, Hindu, Hindi, you know, I can't think of any other or any religions that say, it's okay to be racist, except for, of course, KKK and white supremacists and even Christian nationalists who try to hide that behind religion. So just saying that you're a good person, and even if you're not religious and you're an atheist, I have great friends who don't believe in God, who still believe they're a great person, and who will stand with me in any conversation when it comes to anti-racism and back me up. So even if you don't have a faith, you still believe you're a good person, let that be a starting point. Let that be a jump off point to connect with someone who is Black and brown, because it's a human lived experience. Many of those, again, getting back to reading books. So we love reading books because of the stories that we read about, and most of them, more than often, are about humans. There are, of course, animal stories out there, but most stories are about humans and their lived experience. And we flock to books like that are engaging, they're exciting. Well, Black and brown community, we're sharing our human experience with you. So on that principle alone, that's how you can connect with us, by just listening with empathy. Because when you listen, that's how you're able to approach empathy. When you come as an authority, if you've never experienced racism, we dismiss you right away. You know, when you talk about, well, I know what you're going through. Well, actually, you don't. You talk to people who lost someone, maybe during a war. Lost them in a war, even COVID, which is a war, and it's on the pandemic. And then you go to, when before COVID, go to their funeral and say, I know exactly what you're going through. And they'll look at you like, that's not what I want to hear. I just want you to listen to me, or just sit next to me and hold my hand. That's all I want.
Yeah.
So just on that, that's how you can begin empathy, by just listening to that person's story and their lived experience.
So as you're talking, I'm seeing this vision pop into my head of a row of houses, and all these people, they know each other maybe a little bit. You know how neighbors are, right? And one of the houses catches on fire, and there's all these hoses and all these buckets of water. But neighbors come outside, they smell the smoke, they see the fire, they're standing on the sidewalk, they're looking at the house burn. And the owner of the house is trying to put the fire out, and all these good people are lined up on the sidewalk just looking, right? They've learned, they may have empathy, they may feel for that person and what they're going through. But there's this next step, that V in love, which is to volunteer yourself to be part of the solution. And that's what a lot of people I'm seeing, unfortunately, they're not doing it. They may learn, they may feel, but they don't get into action. They don't pick up a hose. They don't pick up a bucket of water. They don't try to fight that fire. They just let the house burn down, right? And so let's talk about that a little bit, that V, that volunteer yourself to be part of the solution in someone's life.
So when it comes to volunteering, as you can see, like what I post on my LinkedIn and my social media, and you know me personally, I believe in community volunteering and just giving of yourself, not, of course, overextending yourself, but do what you can for the community if you pronounce you're a good person or you want to be a better human being and help people. That being said, people, I can't remember the exact statistic, but I know it was over 60 people in the white community, 60% of the white community said that they did not have close friends who were minority, people of color, or black or brown. So if you want to be over 60%, yes, didn't have close friends. They had work, of course, associates, and they had, bosses or leaders, or maybe even church community, but they didn't have really close black friends. And we see that because racism is so extensive and exhaustive, that kind of pairs into that statistic. That being said, for people who, especially the white community, or people that are benefiting from white privilege by proximity, who don't look, exactly with a lot of melanin, but like have more whiter skin, but still is part of an ethnicity, I would say if you really want to be into the anti-racism movement, or just, fight racism on what you can do, volunteering is a great vehicle. Now, what does that look like? Well, look in your community, not right now, of course, because of the pandemic, but after the pandemic, when it comes to education, especially I'm part of the local school board in my area in Pennsylvania, and I go to the meetings, and I even work with school board members and through the school district. Just going when it comes to education, when different curriculums come up and they do not address race or racism, be a proponent to speak out against that and say we want more inclusive, especially racially inclusive curriculum in our school district. Because the school district, at least that I live in, we have 13,000 students, very diverse. The big Bangladeshi community, a big Asian community, a big Black community, Hispanic community, and of course Native American community, and then 1% is other. And so we have sometimes some really great interactions and conversations on this curriculum. So that's one way you can go, and they're basically like normally once a month or bi-monthly that you can go to, and right there you can be a voice that carries, courageously and loudly and speaks to anti-racism. Even going to your local, whether you go to church, whether you go to a synagogue, whether you go to temple, inviting someone that does not look like you if you're not Black or brown, and inviting them, and if, or just having lunch with them and saying, would you, want to have lunch after of course, pandemic ends. But you
Yes.
know, just
Yes.
having a conversation
Yes.
and say, you know, I'm just gonna put my cards on the table. I don't know a lot about, you know, racism because I haven't experienced it, but I want to be better. So, you know, if we can't have lunch, and let's have a
Yeah.
conversation here on Zoom. Okay, and I just want to talk to you if you're open to it. Send them an email, send them a note. I don't know of many Black or brown people that would refuse that. You know, if the person is
Right.
genuine,
Right.
if the person
Yeah.
is genuine and they really want to be better. Even if it's just, you know, your neighbor. You know, if you know, there are many different, of course, diverse communities. I live in a community. You know, my husband, thankfully, like I'm self-employed, so right now everything is shut down. But my husband's working, thankfully, even though his hours are cut back. But gratefully and thankfully, he works for a food distribution center as a supervisor. And so thankfully, you know, he gets food from distribution areas or he'll get coupons to go shopping. And so, you know, it's just right now my husband and me in our home. And so, you know, there's so much food here. So I'll make little gift bags for my neighbors and I'll leave it
Oh,
on the
okay.
porch or in
Yeah.
front of their door. You know, if
Oh,
I have
nice.
too much, you know, non-perishables, but I'll leave it.
Yeah.
And then they'll send me a note, you know, and the white people and other people in my community, and we talk. And that's, I talk about, you know, inevitably we'll have a conversation or they'll mention something. And I say, I don't know if you're aware of that, but to a person like me, what you're saying, that's racist. But because I've already broken bread with them, they're more readily acceptable of listening to what I have to say. So I appreciate it on that end. And again, I'm not using the gift bag to lure them in. I'm just being a good neighbor. But if they happen to say something, I can correct them and say, you know, many people might not correct you on that. So, you know, and I can kind of, you know, have the conversation and see where they are with that. And if they really want to make a difference, then I'll speak more to that. So just little things like that, you know, and that takes, you know, courage on our part. You know, I know because of people in the Black and brown community, you know, because of our opportunities, are oftentimes so limited. When we find that great opportunity in corporate America or in nonprofit or education at six figures, I get it. You don't want to speak out against, you know, the hand that's feeding you. You don't want to ruffle, you know, feathers. And not that, you know, I wouldn't do it because, I would still be professional, but I would speak against racism. That's my career. But I get why they wouldn't do that. But in your local area, in your home, you know, it's okay, to let people know that that's not okay to address me or say that, you know, and let me tell you why that's racist or why that's bias, you know, and I find friends who come at me in a genuine way, the friendships are more intimate, the friendships are more grounded, the friendships are more real. I love love. My husband, he's a hopeless romantic, and that's one of the reasons why I married him. But we didn't get along. Like, you know, our first date together, I was just like, this guy, this joker, you know, he's just an idealist, you know. And I had my mom's side of being ambitious, and he's just, you know, let's, you know, part Jamaican, let's heal the world. And I'm just like, whatever, dude. Like, what time is it, you know? But he pushed me when it came to politics and when it came to different areas I believed in. And so just in that conversation alone, I was like, I don't know if I like you, but I like the conversation we're having, you know, and that built intimacy and engagement. So, you know, a friend of mine always said, and it's probably a famous quote, but I don't know who said it. They said, you know, when you have two people, if you're always agreeing with each other, one of you is not needed.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
So, you know, it's important to have those courageous conversations for better relationships, because racism came through policy, and racism came through institutionalized practices. Anti-racism, I believe the next wave will come through relationship. That's just my take. I'm not a prophet, but I just believe
I think you're right. I think you're right. We're seeing that in the work that we're doing. You've been to and participated in several screenings of our film, Walking While Black, Love is the Answer. You have been, you know, right there in the mix, right, with what's going on in Pennsylvania with our friends there, and we've seen some amazing things happen. Matt Weintraub, the DA. first
Yeah, the DA,
DA in
yeah.
the country to license
Yeah.
the film, right?
Yeah.
And so the police department's there, the Barbara Simmons with
Yes.
the
Shout out to Barbara Simmons, the
yes,
peace, the
yes.
peace there.
They've been doing some incredible work, and they've been courageous. And
Yeah.
so, so now we've been through the learn, the open the heart, the volunteer yourself to be part of the solution, and then that last step is the empower others. The E is for empower others to do the same. So, what can each of us do right now to not only do those first three steps, but
Mm-hmm.
spread that net wider, like you're doing
Mm-hmm.
with your LinkedIn, your Facebook? You're getting messages out to more people, to a broader audience. You're equipping them with tools that they need. You're going out into, you were, when we were allowed to gather groups, going out
Yes.
into the community and doing hands-on work. So right now, what can we do with COVID-19 separating us, with this social distancing? How can we empower others? And then what should we look forward to doing once we're able to gather again?
So I will just go back to your brilliant film, Welcome While Black, Love is the Answer. Thank you for that film. It's amazing. Of course, I've seen it many times. I never get tired of it. And thank you for including me on the project. Really appreciate that. And if you're listening, Netflix, shout out. HBO,
Please.
shout out. Most great movies, of course, start grassroots, but you've had a following for the last 2 years, thankfully. So I'll go back to that. When we had a showing, in fact, in Bucks County, with Welcome While Black, Love is the Answer. And we had over 600 people come to the screening. And that was students, and that was mostly adults and parents that came, and professional people in the community, and lawmakers and law enforcement. Then, of course, we paired up in different groups after the film, and I facilitated some of those groups. And the groups that I had that were in my group, at least, that were assigned to me, were 95% white. So imagine, watching the film, and you can go to Vivo now and watch it, I believe, for $10.
Vimeo.com. Yeah.
And
We'll put a
watch
link
it.
there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Please watch it, because there's so much great information and human interest stories and what you can do to make it better. And just having the group there, my facilitation group, having 95% white, and looking at them, and then looking at me like deer caught in headlights. There were some women who, after, and even men, after the viewing, I'm standing up, and they were so quiet, and I could just see tears. Like that one tear from the movie Glory with Denzel Washington coming down. It was like the white version. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm just overwhelmed, and I can't believe this is happening to my neighbors, and I never knew it was this bad, and what was going on. And so I was able to not only, of course, share even more experiences, but show them how they can be empowered to make a difference. And I said, if, whether you realize this or not, just by you coming to this film, you have empowered yourself, because now you have information you did not have before. And you have correct information from people who actually are living this experience of racism. Black people and brown people, we will be so happy if racism was eliminated and gone. We know that's not our reality. So we make the best of what's happening, and we fight with that. In our heritage, we know we're warriors. So we've been empowered for the last 400 years to fight this. There are some white people who are just like sleeping giants, who are just waking up saying, I didn't know. There was one guy in the facilitation group. He was actually, I believe he was I want to say a lawyer, but I'm not for sure. But he was like, my kid, he's watching this weekend. I don't care. He's, he was just empowered to speak to his family right there, starting where you live with your family, watching the film. That's one way to get, empowered, just by information. Good information, and correct and accurate information empowers people. So getting the right information is key.
So I want to give a shout out also to Fred Heron, with the police department there, right? Because
and Chachi too, and Yaden, and the chief of police, Chachi, as well, and Yaden as well. I facilitated his group as well of law enforcement. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's where it all started, right? Because Chachi They
Yes.
were one of the 12 cities that participated in our National Day of
Yes. Shout
Reconciliation,
out to the Yale Police
September
Department.
17th.
Philly!
Yes. and so from there is where this kind of grew, and Matt learned about it, and this whole thing went, and everybody's working together, the nonprofits. I know the NAACP has been involved
Yes.
as
Yes.
well, and they're looking to spread it out into other parts of Pennsylvania. We've had
Yes.
really good relationships with NAACP branches around the country. I'm a member.
Same here. I am
We've
as
really
well.
worked. Yeah, that's a group that has done really well, with the film, and
Yes.
facilitated a lot of great discussions. So we've been through the L, the O, the V, the E. We teaching people to learn, open their hearts, volunteer themselves, empower, and just get this message out there. And so here we are. We have covered a lot of great topics. We're getting towards the end of our time. We're getting ready to wrap up. I want to do something really fun with you right now. All right. So we have this little word association game that we do at the end of each of these called I love. And so I'll say something, I'll say a word, and just tell me the first word or two that pops into your mind, or a sentence if you want to elaborate when I say that word.
Okay.
All right. Ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. I'll start off with an easy one. Racism.
I do not love it. I hate it. But I believe through love and relationship, we can make a difference.
See, I figured I'd do that one first because you can do that. You can handle anything.
I'm a Jersey girl. We can. Jersey!
Yes, shout out to Jersey. Okay, favorite food.
Lasagna. It's everything.
Oh, that's good.
It has everything in it. Pasta, meat, sauce. Come on. I'm a Jersey girl.
Got a bunch of the food groups in there.
Yes.
TV series.
TV series. Little Fires with Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. Ooh, it's good.
Is that good? I haven't watched that yet.
Oh, for a racial equity consultant like myself and people who work in diversity and inclusion, it's just like for people who are watching it, we're just like, we have different chats rooms on it. We're like, yes, they mention that. They mention racism and microaggressions, and they mention explicit and implicit bias. It's just like a Super Bowl for us. We're just like diversity, racial inclusion, racial equity, Little Fires. It's everything. Little Fires. Oh, wow. Little Fires. Please watch that. Yes. It's on Hulu, I believe.
Okay. Wow. I might have to get Hulu now.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite? Now, I know you can't go there right now, but favorite vacation spot?
Oh, Jamaica. My husband, his family, at least third generations from Jamaica. And my grandfather being part of the Jamaica part of North Carolina, Jamaica. It's just beautiful. The people. We had our honeymoon there, Montego Bay.
Nice.
Yes, love it.
How long have you two been married?
So we've been married 10 years, August 20th.
Awesome.
So August 8th. My husband's birthday is August 20th. August 8th is our anniversary.
You better hope he doesn't watch this.
I know, right? Anyway, but 10 years married, 12 years together. We're still newbies, and again, when I got married, I had a lot of fun dating. This is totally off topic, but I had a lot of fun dating. But I always was taught by my father and my grandfather that when you get married, you want to live with someone that you not just love, that you like. And I like my husband. I really like him. And during this pandemic, it's so important to be with people that you like. Some people, are just like, what did I do? But just being with someone who I can still laugh with and go on walks with, that's free and walk hand in hand or just go for a ride, and still have a great conversation. He's just, he's my person. So I'm
That's
really, I
awesome.
mean, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I said, God, you have to pick my man because I'm a lot to take. I know that of myself, being, and racial equity and just my personality. So I'm gonna let you do that. And then through a friend who actually introduced us, and I said before when I first met, I didn't like, talking with him because he was just too, lovey-dovey. And I'm like, that's not where I live right now. There's a war out there. There's racism and I'm a black woman. I want to succeed. And he softened me.
Yeah.
He softened me, and so
Okay.
yeah.
That balance. That
Balance, so key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
More than one word,
awesome.
sorry.
No, that's great. And I'm so excited that you're most excited about that, right? Because that's
Yeah.
what it's all about. And it's a good fitting way to wrap this up, because this book, this work that we're doing together, the Love is the Answer book, it started with a desire to improve police community relations.
Yes.
And so what I did is I really struggled with, okay, how am I going to write this? And when Jane and I were heading to Hawaii for our 24th anniversary last,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So we're coming up on 26 now, but when we
Yeah.
were going for our 24th, almost 2 years ago now, I started to write down all these things, 24 things that I had learned, in the first 24 years of our marriage. And that turned into 25 things. And that's the meat of what I write about in the book, is all these things that apply to developing a successful, healthy marriage are the same exact things that we need to do with police community relations. And so an amazing thing has happened in that, and that's, why on the cover of the book, we've got she and I, let me see if I can get the lighting right. That's from our 25th anniversary. That photograph is
I
from our
love it.
25th
She's
anniversary.
beautiful.
Thank you. And so I write all these things that I learned during the first 25 years, and then equate that to what can we do to take those things into the police community relationship as well. And so I think it's fitting, that we have a bunch of people, not everyone, but a bunch of people in the book who have contributed, who have amazing stories to tell about their marriages and about the road that they've traveled and what they've learned and how they've adapted and adjusted and learned from each other. And it's not all warm and fuzzy. It's not all good times. We have to, right? We gotta give and take. Yeah. We gotta learn how to be patient. We gotta learn to admit when we're wrong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Compromise. Yeah. And so all these
My
things.
husband apologizes more than I do, but yeah.
Good man.
And he should.
Yes, he should. Yes. Yeah, we should. And so, the side benefit to this book, I'm already starting to see it. I had a firefighter and a police officer. So 2 separate times in the same week, I had guys, they had gotten the book and then they wanted to get another copy, or one wanted to get a second copy for his wife and the other was going to share it. And he started to read it by himself and he said, no, we got to read this together. So what's happening is we've got this book that is now not only affecting police community relations, improving black and white relations, but it's also helping married people and just couples in general to strengthen their relationships. So added side benefit, very, very cool.
Yeah, my husband, I love him. When we first got the book, when you sent it to us, thank you. And he saw, of course, my name in the book. We have a favorite pizza place that we go to in our area. And the first thing he did was give the owner the book and say, "That's my wife in there. That's my wife in there." And I was just like, "Oh, honey," and he was so nice, and he was just like, and he really enjoyed it. And he was, of course, Italian, and he said, I learned a lot. I learned learned a lot, and now even our conversations now when we go for pizza, before the pandemic going in, they were a lot more grounded and more real. And, I got to know him and even his family and my family together more because of that. Like I said, I mentioned before, racism, is meant to divide, and it thrives in division. Anti-racism will, I believe, thrive, and it's just my opinion. I have no science to back it up, but I believe just by experience, it will thrive in relationship, authentic, not superficial, authentic relationships.
Well, I believe that. I received that. We are seeing that. You've seen it. I've seen it all over the country. People are realizing that when, those walls go up to divide, the only thing to make it better is to tear those walls down and build bridges and build those relationships. Yes. And that's what we hope to do more of, because we're seeing it happen. And any community that we go into where there's a divide between police and people of color, the first thing we do is we get them working on some projects together, whether they like each other or not. Build a community garden together, or refurbish a small community center together, something where you can have a common objective. And as you're shoulder to shoulder, or working in the dirt to build a garden, you start to learn a little bit about the other person, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a minute, maybe that person is not so bad. Yeah. Maybe I can see past that badge and gun, or maybe I can, see past that hoodie. All those stereotypes that we built up in our minds kind of melt away when we get to know each other.
Well, think about it in this way as well. I mentioned school, how it was really basically a vehicle for me to just better myself, and I loved and get closer to my grandfather. Think about school relationships, whether through college or whether through K through 12. Some of the best relationships we will ever have or had came through school. One of the first things I know kids, we've been working with kids, say when they come home, I met a new friend. And maybe they look nothing like them, or maybe they have nothing in common, but because of the conversations they had and because of the things they experienced together, that fortified that relationship. So that's no different than talking with law enforcement. We're all different. We have different experiences. We know the history and the racism around that, but you're here. So that tells me as a Black person, you want to be part of the solution instead of being part of the problem. So let's build on that.
Amen. Yeah, that's a great way to end things. Be part of the solution. De-Dee Loftin Davis, I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you. We'll put your links in the text there. But is there anything else that you want to leave with?
Just stay safe. Listen to the science. Listen to the science. Listen to the science when it comes to this COVID-19. People, there are so many different talking heads out there, but follow the science. Credible science. Like CDC science. Yeah.
From people who have qualifications.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Love is the Answer podcast number 2. I'm AJ Ali, your host. I was with De-Dee Loftin Davis. You can learn more about us at loveistheanswermovement.com. And be safe, stay strong, stay home, and we'll see you soon when the coast is clear.
Look forward to it.
Okay. Aloha, shaka, peace, love. Be well.